Hey, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good, good. Hopefully you can hear me okay. You'll see in a second why my voice is a little gone this morning. But my name is Jason Markey. I'm a Google certified teacher and principal at East Leiden High School. I'll have this page up at the end as well, but I have my contact information via Twitter and via email. Please feel free to reach out. I'm going to change how I usually present some of this information, but we'll get into that in just a second. So I'll let you snap that, but I'll put that up again at the end. The first things first, I am from Chicago, so let's hear it for the Blackhawks. Maybe not many Blackhawks fans or hockey fans. So we were enjoying the celebration last night, so that's, again, why my voice is struggling just a bit. But my high school is right outside of Chicago. So we are at 9 through 12 district. We have about 1,800 students in my school, about 3,500 in the district. This past year, we went one-to-one for the entire district for all 3,500 students, all with Chromebooks, and they take the Chromebook home with them. So I know those are a few of the questions. What I really want to talk about is why we did that. You know, I think the most important thing to always start with, as Simon Sinek says in the book, is start with the why. You need to understand the vision of anyone you talk to about this. And really, you know, we have many things we could go through with this. Usually we go through 21st century fluencies and the importance of the web. You're all here. You all understand that. For us, you know, the bottom line is we wanted to create opportunity for our students to find new opportunities. So we wanted to create opportunities for our students to find new opportunities. I don't know what those are, and I don't want to limit those by defining them for our students. And most importantly, when we were making this decision, we talked to a lot of our students, and we talked to a lot of our students that were in our pilot programs, where they had access all of the time within their class, and their teachers knew they were going to have access. And what we saw when we saw our great students, who all of you have great students and all of you have great teachers, but when those two intersect with guaranteed access, some truly amazing things happen. And what we identified were those were our pockets of excellence in our district. Now, the most important thing that we determined very early on, talking to some of those students, and I remember I talked to a senior that graduated last year. Her name was Annie Nesbitt, and she was one of the pilot students in her senior year, and she was angry with me. She said, "Why did you not do this all 4 years I was in high school? I mean, this is so amazing. I can go on my phone and get to my essay. I can just find something new. My teachers are letting me kind of go my own direction." And she was somewhat upset. She was very happy she had that opportunity, but she really wanted that all 4 years. And that was a very easy sell for our Board of Education. And they guaranteed us that not another class would graduate from Leiden without having guaranteed access. So that's what sped up our process quite a bit. And that's important. I think, for me, whether students should have access is not a question. If you were in Michael Mills' Ignite session the other day, I thought he put it brilliantly. I mean, guaranteed access should be a right for all of our students. The only question I think sometimes is when. And I think the only thing that should stop you from giving kids access is if you don't have infrastructure for it. You have to make sure, obviously, that you have a good infrastructure, that your wireless in your building is ready to go. You don't want it to fail when you hand out 100, 200, 3,000 devices. But as long as that is ready, don't let anything else stop you. It's kind of like buying a house. Sometimes you just need to jump in. And I know professional development is a concern for all teachers. That was certainly the thing that we got the most pushback from. No one disagreed. We surveyed all 260 of our teachers. We did not get one anonymous response back that said they didn't want to go one-to-one. They all wanted to go one-to-one, but some of them said, not next year. Let's wait 2 years. Let's do a lot of professional development up front. It was about a 50-50 split, and ultimately we decided to push it out because really you can only do so much professional development ahead of having access in every kid's hands. And what some people I think also misunderstand from my perspective is, you know, they see teachers that don't use technology as resistant teachers. That is not always the case and usually not the case. Usually the case is the school hasn't guaranteed them access, so they're not going to commit all of their efforts towards limited access. I was a high school teacher. I had 5 sections a day. I'm not going to teach 2 of my classes at a computer lab, completely change my lesson plan to do an analog lesson. So as soon as you guarantee access, what you'll see is the teachers will come right along with it. And then you have to certainly support them as you're moving forward. And then another thing that we always come back to, the Alec Kuros quote, if you've heard it before, I always come back to this, is you're not trying to do things differently, you're trying to do different things. And I think that's a really important difference. Now, sometimes it is just doing things differently. Sometimes it's a slight modification to something you've been doing. But ultimately, you want to find those transformative practices where you can truly find things that you could not do without access to the web. And my session is really going to be focused on the web and why that's so dynamic. So the first thing is create. You know, I think we hear that a lot, right? We want our students to create. And one of the biggest areas I received pushback on from other people when we chose Chromebooks a year or so ago was, you know, can they create with that? It's just the web. Well, I think many of you have seen where the web has gone in a very short time. And ultimately, I want my kids creating, publishing, and collaborating. And those are things that you don't do when you're off the web. You're not instantly collaborating just by pushing the button to share with others. And you're not instantly publishing to the web. So that's where I think the web and the HTML5 platform has a significant advantage over some other things. So when we talk about create, ultimately what we try to get to is our students are determining what they're creating. So I don't want, you know, a great quote from Chris Lehman is, if you assign a project that has 30 of the exact same outcomes, you've assigned a recipe. You haven't assigned a project. And I think that's very important. So a lot of our teachers now, and I have a quick example that maybe I'll show if I have time, but a lot of our teachers are now just assigning the outcomes, what they want, but they're not saying do it with this application. I want you to create a video or a PowerPoint or a slideshow or a photo montage or an essay. They're assigning, I want you to demonstrate something. I want you to make an argument. I want you to have an opinion. And then however you present that, fantastic. So there's the first example I'll try to show real quick. Whoops. Is from our industrial technology class. And she just said they were dealing with employee conflict in a cooperative classroom where students are in the workplace and then they have a classroom portion. And she said you can demonstrate employee conflict however you want. And this student used an animation between a hippo and an elephant to demonstrate employee conflict. And this is something, again, completely web-based that you can do. It's actually free. Like many of these things, the free ones have various options.
I was doing the quarterly review, and I do believe that you went over the food budget.
Well, then your grade but should send corporate a letter saying we need more peanuts.
Why don't you send one explaining your reasoning?
I'm not your workhorse, Marty.
Calm down, Lucy, or I will fire you.
Too late, my trunk is already packed.
So I like the trunk joke, if you didn't hear that. So I think it's really important to give kids options in creating. Another example, and creating isn't always with the device. I think that's another important point. I want our kids to be hands-on. If they're in art class, they shouldn't be using this to make illustrations all the time. They should be drawing. They should be painting. They should be sculpting with their hands. But where this comes in, then they can have a blog about their process. We had a student this year did an amazing sculpture that I actually purchased from her at the end of the year. It's going to be in our school forever. And she didn't use any technology to make the sculpture, nor should she have. But what she did is we had her blog about her process all the way through. Because people started coming from all over the school as they saw her work on this. And it became like a life-size sculpture. And she won various awards and actually won an art scholarship for it. And again, it didn't have anything to do with the technology and the creation, but her reflection and her sharing her reflection had a huge impact on other students. So I think that's where the kind of the differentiation is. Again, get kids hands-on still. Just because you go one-to-one doesn't mean you should do virtual dissections or virtual labs in science all of the time. Whenever you can, kids should be hands-on. And another point, when they're in class, they shouldn't always be on the device. That was a concern of our teachers. They assumed I was going to come in as a principal and I was going to say, well, how much should I be using it? Are you going to be upset if I'm not using it? Are you going to tell me to use it more? And if anything, I talk to our teachers about using it less. The whole point of one-to-one access is they can have access anytime, anywhere. In class, we need to take advantage of the opportunity we have to communicate. So again, if anything, I was asking them to let the kids talk more. You talk with the kids more. Have them talk to each other while they're in class. They can do that other stuff asynchronously since we've given them access. So I think that's an important point as well. Another huge point for us is getting the students to share their voice. You know, many people have put it different ways. Rushton Hurley has a great quote about the difference between publishing something to the internet and handing something back to a teacher. I mean, all of you know what happens to those papers. You just hand it to the teacher. They hand back a graded final product, and it goes wherever it goes. No one else has a chance to see that kid's work, to see that kid's process. They don't have a chance to write for an audience, to create for an audience, which is a completely different dynamic when you have students creating for an audience. And they'll put in a totally different degree of effort, and you'll see different products from their work when they know it's going straight to YouTube, when they're blogging about it, it's going up on a Google Plus page, whatever it is, whatever platform you're using. So sharing your voice. One example that I really like is we started a blog. A friend of mine, George Kuros, and Megan Howard, who's a principal in Atlanta. George Kuros is an administrator in Canada. They actually came up with this idea of doing what they call the Learn 365 blog. So the idea is that every day a learner in your community would share some of their experiences, share their perspective, share a story. Well, this is one of my favorite ones. We had a student last year who was a senior, just graduated, Jeremy Mercado, one of my favorite kids I've ever met in my life. And if it wasn't for this blog, I would have never got to know him as principal. I knew him. I knew who he was. He was a very polite kid, but I wouldn't have really known him. He wrote a very long narrative here, and it got a few thousand hits on the internet. And it's really a poem, and he's talking about how people are storytellers. And then at the end, he put a video of him doing slam poetry. And what I didn't realize before he blogged at our school is that he's being asked by people all over the country. He spent 6 weeks in New York City the summer before doing slam poetry, and I had no idea as his principal. And that's terrible because he didn't have a platform within our school. Other community organizers were asking him to come across the country, and we weren't taking advantage of that in our own school. When I asked him to write the blog, when I heard about it, then it gave him kind of this new lease on life in our school within the building. And people started to identify. Other kids came up to him and said, wow, you are amazing. That poetry is unbelievable. And then at the end of his senior year, and this was not an assignment, this was not a capstone, he actually designed kind of a coffee house performance that he completely organized. He reserved the facilities, he did the catering organization, he recruited all the talent, and put on a coffee house performance for 3 hours with all of these student performers from our district. And that was really, I believe, all because we gave him the platform. We gave him an audience, and we acknowledged that your learning is valuable. No one ever assigned him to write poetry other than your basic classroom assignments. But he found a mentor in our English department, and as soon as he had that platform, it really again gave him a new lease on life. And he was one of the 3 students that was highlighted by our superintendent at graduation. So again, that kind of trajectory that he took after that experience was really pretty amazing. Sorry, I'm just switching back to my other slide here. The next point is empowerment. So if we look at creating, sharing student voice, and then I think this is the most critical piece, empowerment. Now, before I kind of go into this, you might wonder, what does this have to, a lot of you probably came, and I apologize to hear about Chromebooks. I know I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is how I believe access to the web for every kid is so powerful. And again, we could have had kids sharing a newspaper other ways without access, but I believe what this access has done in several different ways, it has truly empowered our students. And I'll give you just a few examples. One example is I've always had a student leadership team that I've worked with. This was my first year as principal, but even as assistant principal the last 4 years, I had a student leadership team that I met with on a regular basis. We send them to leadership workshops, they come back, and we work together. They were empowered this year for a few different reasons. Number one, we had an ongoing dialogue asynchronously all of the time through a Google Plus community. So we started, as soon as communities came out, we started a Google Plus community, and it completely changed the dynamic of how they felt and how they responded to that leadership committee. So it went far beyond, okay, once a month we're going to meet, and I'm going to take in, your suggestions, and then maybe you'll hear from me in a month. Maybe I'll never talk to you about it. It was an ongoing dialogue, not between me and the students, but amongst the students about what their ideas were. And I think that was a really powerful thing and an empowering thing for our students. So what the culminating event was, they had kind of almost like a little presentation slam at the end of the year in May, about 3 weeks before we were done with school. And what I told them was, you guys are going to present to us your idea as you formed it throughout the year, what change you want to see in our school, what improvement you want to see. And then whatever one seems like it's ready to go right now, you're going to present to our administrative council. So I chose 2 students, along with our activities director and our athletics director, that all viewed the presentations, and the students themselves decided there was one about the assignment of a grade for a particular course they felt very strongly about, how it should be weighted. And they actually presented that to our superintendent and all of our district and building administrators. And then it's ultimately, if it goes forward, they're going to probably come into a department chair meeting at the beginning of next year, and then they'll go in front of our Board of Education presenting it as their idea. So when you have students going and really making change in your building, and again, that could have happened without this, but the ability for them to communicate asynchronously and have that feeling of this is our community. This is not me just emailing Mr. Markey and asking him if we could do this. This is us as a community, as an organization saying, you go talk about it, decide what we should do, and tell us how we can be better as a school. And I think that's incredibly powerful. To go along with kind of the Learn 365 idea, which part of that idea was empowerment as well. We're going to start something new this year, which is a Twitter account. Now, that's not a crazy idea, but I've never had a Twitter account for our school because I didn't want to be the one pushing information. I'll kind of explain what we do as a school in the next slide. Well, we're going to start one this year, but it's going to be a little bit different. And I actually got the idea on the flight down here the other day. Sweden, as a country, they just started a Twitter account. And what they do is every week, they assign the rights to that account to another citizen of Sweden. And they let that citizen tweet from their perspective all the things that they do in the country, all the things that they're proud of from their perspective, their view throughout that entire week. So what we're going to start next year at my building is I'm going to have that Twitter account, and whoever chooses to apply will get the rights to tweet from that account. So whether it's a teacher, a parent, a community member, or ultimately students, then we would like them to be, again, in control and be empowered by us hearing their voice. And again, that doesn't have to be where every kid has access, but it just shows you, I think, how our thinking has started to change once kids have access. We start to think about it all of the time. Now what can we do with this? How can we make it different? How can we do different things with this access? And ultimately, again, as I talked about, that's what we're attempting to do. I think one of the most important things, and in all honesty, something I feel like I didn't do nearly enough with as a principal, and I think as a district we need to do more and more with continually, is digital citizenship. Okay? When you decide you're going to push students to the web, you are putting a responsibility on yourself, I believe, as a school district to talk even more about this than we already should be. And we talked about it. I did things monthly for parents. I pushed out a lot of information to students. We do video announcements. I have messages to them. The other thing that we did throughout the year is, like I said, I didn't have a Twitter account, but what I ask of everyone is to contribute through Twitter about what you're proud about. So we have this hashtag called Leiden Pride. And again, this is a dangerous thing. And as a first-year principal, I think some people looked at me like I was crazy because if you know anything about hashtags on Twitter, you have no control over it. I have zero control to what people post on our Leiden Pride hashtag. Please don't abuse that right now. But our students, remarkably, 3,500 students, I had about 3 or 4 issues that I had to address throughout the entire year. And really one of those was the day that we blocked Twitter in our school. There were some issues because that was kind of a conflict, right? But one of the reasons we felt like we had to block it is because we didn't do enough to talk about digital citizenship. And we need to do more. So this is something that was designed in our graphic design class. I'm having banners printed that are going to be up around our school, and it's going to be an ongoing topic of discussion when I have my monthly student meetings, not the student leadership meetings, but I also meet monthly with random students that I just draw, and I meet with them, and we're going to constantly be communicating about their responsibility for representing their school. And again, I think that's another point on empowerment is constantly we should be communicating. This is your access. This is your device. This is the web for you, and this is your school. So those are a few of the things that I wanted to touch on. Again, I know there might be lots of questions you have more about nuts and bolts and how did you go one-to-one. I am more than happy to share all of those things, and I'll show you, I'll let you snap that or however you want to collect that information, and then I'll show you our website where you can get a lot more information as well because, you know, one of the things that we benefited from is, as I mentioned, I tried to reference everyone I took things from stole things from, talked to, collaborated with, because I talk to people all the time. Before we went one-to-one, we visited about 9 schools in multiple states, and I talked to about 48 to 50. In-person, talk to them on the phone, doing a Google Hangout, whatever it was. And that's essential. So one of the things that we tried to do to give back, and I'll finish with this, just showing you where this is at. On our Leiden website, which is just leiden212.org, you can click on this computer right here, and I'm not promoting this conference because it's already sold out, so that's not what I'm doing. But on this page, there's going to be all sorts of resources from our conference. All of the presentations will be posted here, and that's going to be in August. So if you're interested in coming back to it. But there's this In the News tab, and what you'll find there are all the different blogs that various people have written about our one-to-one journey. And we've tried to be as comprehensive as possible. We certainly probably fell off towards the end of the year when it got busier. I'm not going to lie to you. We're going to need to do some reflecting this summer. But I certainly want you to have the opportunity, if you have any follow-up with me. Also, if you click on the Follow Us, you'll see Brian Weinert, our tech director's information, and Mikkel Storsley's information, our assistant superintendent. And again, we try to share as much as possible because we know how much we've gained from our community. So thank you very much. I won't take up any more of your time. If you have any questions, please come up and see me.